Right. So if you've been paying attention to what's happening in the UK car market over the past year or so, you'll know things are shifting. Not gradually, properly shifting. And the reason everyone's talking about it is because BYD just made a move that's got the entire industry scrambling. If you don't know who BYD are yet, you're about to. They're a Chinese manufacturer that's been quietly building electric vehicles, batteries, and hybrid systems, whilst most of the Western world was still debating whether EVs were actually going to catch on. Now they're here, in the UK, and they're not mucking about. This isn't just another electric car launch. This is something that's fundamentally changing how the market works, how dealerships operate, and what British buyers can actually expect to pay for quality vehicles. Let me break down what's actually happening, because it's more interesting than just Chinese company enters UK market. This is about something bigger. It's about a shift in global manufacturing power and what that means for you, sat on your sofa thinking about what car to buy next. The first thing, price, and why it's genuinely shocking. Right. So the conventional wisdom in the UK car market has always been this. You want an electric vehicle, you're paying a premium. That's just how it is, full stop. A decent EV costs you somewhere between $35,000 and $50,000, depending on what you're after. And that's before you get into the properly nice ones that cost 60 grand or more. A Tesla Model 3, you're looking at 45 grand minimum. A BMW i4, 55 grand. An Audi e-tron, similar story. Those prices have been treated as gospel for the past 5 years. It became the accepted truth. EVs are expensive. That's the trade-off for having zero emissions and low running costs. You pay more up front, you save money over time, right? BYD's approach is different, completely different. They're looking at that pricing structure and going, no, actually, we're going to undercut it significantly. We're talking vehicles that offer genuine range, 300 miles, 350 miles on some models, proper build quality that doesn't feel like a compromise, and modern tech that's genuinely impressive, at prices that British buyers actually recognize as reasonable. We're talking about proper family saloons at under $25,000, crossovers with real cargo space at $28,000, electric vehicles that aren't economy hatchbacks, but actual proper cars, at prices that don't make you wince when you sign the paperwork. That's genuinely shocking to the market, because when you've got manufacturers like BMW, Audi and Mercedes all saying, this is what an EV costs, and then someone comes in and says, actually you're charging too much, it creates a problem, not for the customer, obviously, for everyone else. Think about what that does. If you're a family in Bristol or Manchester or anywhere else, and you've been thinking, I can't afford to go electric, suddenly you can. That's not a small thing. That's a seismic shift. The margin compression is real, and it's coming fast. You're going to see some established manufacturers panicking. Some already are. The second thing, the batteries and the supply chain advantage. Here's where it gets properly interesting. BYD doesn't just make cars, they make batteries. In fact, they're the largest battery manufacturer in the entire world. We're talking about producing batteries for more vehicles than anyone else on the planet. When you own the supply chain like that, you have a fundamental advantage that's almost impossible for competitors to match. Think about this for a second. Traditional manufacturers, Volkswagen, BMW, Ford, all of them, they've been dealing with battery supply constraints for years. Lithium prices spike, and suddenly your profit margins on every EV get squeezed. Cobalt supply chains get disrupted somewhere in Africa or Asia, and production gets delayed. Nickel becomes scarce, prices triple overnight. All of that uncertainty filters down to the dealership and eventually to you. BYD controls their own battery production. They mine lithium, they process cobalt, they manage the entire supply chain vertically. So when they price a vehicle, They're not paying market rates for batteries, they're paying internal costs. That's a completely different game. Let's put numbers to it. A traditional manufacturer might pay $8,000 to $10,000 for a 60 kilowatt-hour battery pack from a third-party supplier. Those costs fluctuate based on global commodity markets. BYD, their internal cost is probably half that, maybe less. They've got economies of scale, they've got optimized production, they've eliminated middlemen. This means they can afford to price aggressively and still maintain healthy margins. Everyone else is stuck squeezing profit from a narrower space. If Volkswagen wants to compete with BYD on price, they're actually cutting into their own margins because their battery costs are higher. It's asymmetrical. It's not competitive in the way we usually think about competition. And here's the thing, it gets worse for traditional manufacturers if lithium prices go up. BYD's margin gets squeezed slightly, Volkswagen's margin gets obliterated. That's structural, that's built in. BYD has insulated themselves from the volatility that everyone else is exposed to. The third thing, the range and tech, no corners cut. You'd expect, right, if they're underpricing everything, that the cars are going to be a bit basic. That's what you'd think. Cheaper price means fewer features, less range, interior that feels a bit plasticky and cheap. That's the usual trade-off. That's not what's happening with BYD, not even close. BYD's vehicles in the UK come with serious range. We're talking 300 miles plus on decent battery packs. Some models are pushing 350 miles on a single charge. That's competitive with anything Volkswagen or Audi are offering at twice the price. The tech inside is modern. Proper integrated infotainment systems with touchscreens that respond quickly, not like pressing buttons on a phone from 2015. Driver assistance features like adaptive cruise control, lane keeping assist, parking sensors all standard. Interior quality is decent, not luxury but solid. The materials don't feel cheap, the fit and finish is there. And here's what's important. BYD's been making vehicles for years in other markets. They've refined the designs. They know what works and what doesn't. They're not bringing a first-generation product to the UK and hoping for the best. They're bringing vehicles that have been tested, refined, and proven in massive markets like China and Southeast Asia. There's proper thoughtfulness in the design. The infotainment systems integrate with smartphones properly. The charging systems are compatible with standard UK infrastructure. The seat comfort is good for long drives. These aren't cars that feel like compromises. They feel like proper alternatives to what established manufacturers are offering, and they cost less. That combination is genuinely disruptive, because the argument, well, you get what you pay for, doesn't quite work when you're paying less and getting broadly similar performance features and reliability. That argument breaks down completely. And when arguments that have held the market together for years break down, it causes chaos for the people who've been relying on them. The fourth thing, dealer network and service, the real risk. Now, this is where some caution actually matters, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is the legitimate weak point. BYD doesn't have the established dealer network that BMW or Mercedes or even Volkswagen have across the UK. If you buy a BYD, you're buying into something that's building its infrastructure. That means service might be less convenient initially. You might not have a BYD service centre within 20 miles of where you live. Warranty support is something you'd need to verify properly. If something goes wrong, you might not have the same level of immediate access you'd get with a traditional dealer. That's a real consideration. It matters. Someone buying a BYD in Aberdeen isn't going to have the same convenience as someone buying a VW Golf in the same town. That's just reality. Here's what I think about that, though. Yes, there's inconvenience, but BYD is investing properly. They're not dipping their toe in and hoping. They're opening dealerships. They're establishing service centres in major population centres. London, Manchester, Birmingham, they're building out. And yes, that rollout is going to take time. It's not going to be day one, everywhere, perfectly established. But here's the counterpoint. How often does your car actually need service? If you're buying a modern EV from BYD, you're not doing oil changes, you're not replacing spark plugs. The brake wear is minimal because of regenerative braking. A lot of the traditional service points just don't exist. Your tire rotations and battery checks can happen at any tire place. Your warranty issues, if they crop up, can often be handled through mobile service or by scheduling an appointment at a dealership, even if it's not super convenient. For customers willing to accept some inconvenience in exchange for saving $8,000, $10,000, maybe more on the purchase price, it's a trade-off that some people will absolutely take, others won't. That's fair. And honestly, it's a perfectly legitimate reason to stick with traditional manufacturers if convenience matters more to you than price. But don't think that infrastructure disadvantage is permanent. Give it 3 years, and BYD's service network in the UK is going to be completely different. They're playing the long game. The fifth thing, what this means for the market, disruption is coming. Here's the thing that's actually keeping other manufacturers awake at night. BYD's entry into the UK market establishes a price floor that's materially lower than what existed before. You can't just ignore that. It's not a niche player. It's not a competitor that might go away. It's a massive, well-capitalized manufacturer with vertical integration that most traditional companies can only dream of. What happens next is interesting. Some manufacturers will try to compete on price, cut their own margins, introduce new affordable models, and try to meet BYD somewhere in the middle. You're already seeing this. Ford's looking at their strategy. Volkswagen's panicking slightly. That's real. Others will try to compete on brand heritage, on perceived quality, on the narrative that their cars are somehow better, even if they cost significantly more. The argument becomes, you're not just buying transport, you're buying German engineering or British reliability or whatever story they want to tell. That second strategy gets harder every time BYD releases a vehicle that's well built and reliable, because at some point, people stop buying the story and start buying value. When you've saved yourself 15 grand and the car works just as well, the emotional appeal of brand heritage gets weaker. Not gone, but weaker. Some of the established players will adapt. They've got resources, engineering talent and brand loyalty, but they'll have to make real changes, not cosmetic tweaks. Actual changes to how they price, how they develop vehicles, how they structure manufacturing, how they think about margins. That's painful. That disrupts internal politics. That means people lose their jobs as factories become more efficient or get consolidated. Others might struggle. Not immediately, but over the next few years there will be consolidation. Brands that can't find a competitive advantage beyond "we've been around longer" will feel real pressure. Some smaller brands might disappear entirely. There will be mergers. There will be rationalization. That's what happens when a new player enters a market and changes the economics fundamentally. The sixth thing, battery safety and reliability. One thing that always comes up when people talk about Chinese-made vehicles is the question of safety. Fair question. Is a BYD battery actually as safe as a Volkswagen battery or a BMW battery? The short answer is yes. BYD's batteries have been tested to the same standards. They pass UK safety requirements. They pass European standards. The battery chemistry is proven. BYD's been making these for years across millions of vehicles. There's real data behind it. In fact, BYD's battery division is so respected that traditional manufacturers buy batteries from them. You know that? VW uses BYD batteries in some of their vehicles. Daimler has partnerships with BYD. They wouldn't do that if the quality wasn't there. Is there a perception gap? Absolutely. People assume Chinese-made means cheaper and potentially less reliable. That's a perception that takes time to shift. But perceptions shift when cars prove themselves over years of ownership. When people have owned their BYD for 5 years with no issues, the perception changes. The battery warranty on BYD vehicles in the UK is solid, typically 8 years or 160,000 kilometers, sometimes better. That's competitive with traditional manufacturers. So from a protection standpoint, you're covered. What actually matters is real-world performance data, and that's still building. But early data from other markets where BYD's been established for longer is positive. These cars are holding up. The seventh thing, the geopolitical angle. This is almost background noise compared to the market implications, but it's worth mentioning. BYD's success in the UK is part of a larger story about Chinese manufacturing capability and Western reliance on that capability. There's been talk about tariffs. The EU's already slapping additional tariffs on Chinese EVs. There's talk about supply chain security, about whether Western governments should be worried about Chinese dominance in EVs and battery technology. Those conversations are happening at government level right now. There are genuine policy debates about whether to restrict Chinese vehicle imports or impose tariffs that would push prices up. The worry is about economic sovereignty, about not wanting to be dependent on Chinese manufacturers for a critical technology. But here's the thing. Those conversations aren't stopping BYD from selling cars in the UK right now. And honestly, from a consumer perspective, you get better vehicles at lower prices. That's hard to argue against politically, even if governments are worried about geopolitical implications. What could change this is tariffs. If the UK government or the government working with the EU decides to put additional tariffs on Chinese vehicles, BYD's prices go up. Suddenly that price advantage shrinks. That's the one thing that could genuinely disrupt what's happening right now. But for now, that's a maybe. That's not a given. So what actually happens now? BYD's establishing itself as a serious player in the UK market. Their vehicles are going to appeal to price-conscious buyers who want decent range and modern tech. That's a massive part of the market. They're going to erode market share from manufacturers that have been relying on the EV premium existing indefinitely. The established players are going to have to sharpen up. That means smarter engineering, leaner manufacturing, and real innovation. Not just more expensive versions of the same cars they've been selling for years. Some will manage it, some won't. For people shopping for a car right now, you've got more options than ever before. And that's genuinely good. Competition drives better products. Competition drives better pricing. Competition drives innovation, because if you don't innovate, someone else eats your lunch. Whether you're thinking about going electric or you're just watching how this market evolves, BYD's move into the UK is worth paying attention to. It's not hype. It's not a flash in the pan. It's a fundamental shift in how cars are priced in the UK market and what buyers can actually expect to get for their money. The market's changing, and change is always uncomfortable for people who benefited from the way things were. Tell me in the comments, have you seen a BYD in person yet? Or would you actually consider one if you were buying an electric vehicle right now? I read every single one, and if this gave you a clearer picture of what's happening in the market, share it with someone who's been confused about all the BYD talk. Subscribe if you haven't already. We've got more on how the car industry is actually shifting coming soon.